Working side by side with my loved ones each day is the highlight of my job. Collaborating with my loved ones is the most challenging aspect of my career. It appeared as though Cory Harrison had everything under control. A family business valued at millions of dollars, not to mention fame and bank accounts. His life, however, was unraveling behind the scenes in ways that were unexpected by everyone. He was already battling for his life at the age of 26 in ways unrelated to the store. Even his own family would be shocked by his desperate decisions by the time he was 30. The burden of unspoken truths, broken hearts, and tragic family histories would end up shattering him. Everything shifted after then. It was worse than you could have imagined. Las Vegas is the site of Cory Harrison's birth on April 27, 1983. The gold and silver pawn shop was already in his family's possession. His grandparents had co-founded it, and his parents ran it, Kim and Rick. Cory was never your average child from a typical family. His family ran a pawn store that would go on to become famous all across the globe, and he was born into it. As a child, Cory spent his days surrounded by nature, rather than the neon signs and casinos that he saw as an adult. In the background, there is the low buzz of negotiations, appraisals, and potential family strife. Las Vegas is the site of Cory Harrison's birth on April 27, 1983. His grandfather and parents, Rick and Kim, had co-founded the gold and silver pawn shop, which was already in their family's ownership. Cory was never your average child from a typical family. His family ran a pawn store that would go on to become famous all across the globe, and he was born into it. Growing up, Cory could hear nothing but the low hum of deals being struck, valuables being valued, and family strife despite the neon lights and casinos that surrounding him. Simmering away in the background, there was more to the store than meets the eye. The rhythm of the family's life. Long before Cory realized how heavy it was, he was already smack dab in the center of it. At 9 years old, Cory had grown tired of watching cartoons. While keeping a careful eye on his grandfather and father, he was also tidying up jewelry and arranging bookcases. They educated him not only in the art of detecting precious metals, but also in the art of detecting human nature, including cues, tricks, and truths. Cory began his literacy journey while other children his age were still grappling with the fundamentals of arithmetic, worth both monetarily and in terms of personality. As early as 12 o'clock, he was managing actual sales. Even though a child was handling their transaction, some of the adults didn't notice, up until the point where they left with less cash than they had anticipated. It wasn't omen. Like a sponge, Cory had been soaking up all the information. Even at the age of 15, he had more practical experience in the corporate world than most college graduates. When Cory was 13 years old, he started to amaze even the staff with his ability to identify vintage guitars, rare coins, and military artifacts. His ability to discern genuineness and the value of an item was second to none. Everyone at the shop began to see that Cory's calls usually had a positive outcome. He possessed what his grandpa referred to as the eye. Not at all magic. There were many hours of observation, exploration, study, and inquiry. At the age of 16, he was already shelling out thousands of dollars at the store and was given significant options to make, even when his choices went against the grain. He was successful the majority of the time on the money. It wasn't easy to grow up in the limelight, though. As a grandson and son, Cory was more than that. It was widely understood that he represented the company's future. Rick, his father, was not a softie and required him to work harder than anybody else. "Nothing matters more than proving yourself," he said, emphatically. While the elderly man was unique, he was no less demanding. All the while, customers and employees were watching to make sure Cory met their expectations. Disputes regarding deals in every household or choice was made with all eyes on the screen. The strain had begun to show by the time he was 17. Even when he began to resist, the strain simply increased. In due time, those cracks would become must-see television. The Big Hose wasn't a made-up moniker. Cory reached his full 16-year-old height and weight of almost 400 pounds. Despite his bulk, it was his rising leadership that really cemented his reputation. Rick began to refer to him in that way, both seriously and in jest, as he was obviously rising through the ranks to boss at the shop. Knowing he could provide a better bargain or a quicker decision, customers began to ask to speak with him directly. Workers twice his age began to defer to his wisdom. Size was no longer the sole determinant of the name. Being present was the key. The gravity of his position increased as his responsibilities expanded. Already in his mid-teens, Cory was taking charge of certain aspects of the business. Even though he was still a high school student, he confidently handled customers, negotiated large orders, and oversaw inventory. With a staff of 30+, the gold and silver pawn shop was staffed by seasoned veterans. On a daily basis, Cory had to demonstrate his worth. Cory continued to step up and take on more responsibilities as his father continued to do so, but this came at a price. Cory was the one who learned the hard way about what could go wrong in the back office while the other youngsters went to dances or hung out at the mall. He learned the hard way that making large purchases without everyone's consent always ends in disaster. When Cory enjoyed something, he would often spend a lot of money on it. Things like vintage automobiles, motorbikes, and rare memorabilia. A few of these goods were financially successful, while others caused some curiosity. There were times when Rick and the old guy would argue loudly in public because they disagreed with his decisions. The family and the staff were deeply affected by these experiences. However, when Pawn Stars did air, they were equally fantastic to watch. Cory had no fear of failing. He continued to stand by his decisions even after things went awry. Early on, Cory decided he didn't want to follow the typical academic route. Although as his peers prepared for examinations, he studied to distinguish Civil War weapons and determine the fineness of gold. He squandered opportunities to socialize, play sports, and attend parties. Yet, he gained a set of abilities that very few individuals his age ever acquired. I didn't hold a degree from an illustrious institution, but he could instantly ascertain the value of a musket from the 19th century. His risk paid off when Pawn Stars took off. His specialized knowledge was suddenly valuable beyond the store. The challenges of being an early boss were unique. A lot of workers were reluctant to follow directions from someone so young. Some of Cory's co-workers had been there since before he was even born, and he had just taken over as manager. His efforts to earn their esteem were multiplied twofold. He introduced fresh concepts, reduced stock, and increased floor space to 15,000 square feet. Hiring Austin Russell, alias Chumley, a buddy of his, was one of his best decisions. Even though no one gave it much of a second thought at the time, that choice ended up influencing the dynamic and cast of the program. In spite of everything, Cory assembled a crew that served the store and the cameras, juggling the demands of a real-life business with those of entertaining millions of spectators. The Harrison family's lives were turned upside down in 2009 due to an unforeseen event. Rick Harrison's YouTube video of himself dealing with a demanding customer made its way to the proper people at the History Channel. Rick had tried to get networks to pick up his pawn shop show for years, but they were all turned down. Then, out of nowhere, producer Nancy DeBuke recognized the store's potential. Initially, HBO was considering a darker late-night version of the show, which was completely different from the current concept. On the other hand, this little video was internet sans anticipations that set off the explosion. It didn't immediately become popular after its July 19, 2009 premiere. Within a year, it had surpassed all of the network's other shows in terms of viewership. When it came to reality TV, only Jersey Shore attracted more viewers. There was no better time than this. The image of a family-run pawn shop fighting through tough circumstances appealed to audiences as they thought about the suffering economy and the pressures on Las Vegas businesses. Cory Harrison was anything but your average television star. At the age of 26, was untrained in acting, and did not have any media training. Something snapped though as soon as the cameras began rolling. The point that Cory was making was not to amuse. There was no mistaking his expertise. He started working at the shop when he was 9 steps, beginning with jewelry washing. He had mastered the entire system from the very beginning over the years. His genuine enthusiasm for vintage vehicles, motorbikes, and antiques was evident. Truly, it was. They were able to convey their enthusiasm to the audience. He has a laid-back tempo and crisp. His sense of humor set him apart from his father's strategic calm and his grandfather's grave demeanor. In 2010, Cory's admirers flooded social media with posts praising him. He had lived through history, not merely explained it. Not only that, he was not scared to take risks with substantial acquisitions, which rendered each scenario utterly unpredictable. The moment of extreme intensity occurred when the level of unpredictability was at its highest. Cory startled his family and viewers with a shocking move in episode 13 of season 7. He came right out and said that he wasn't willing to stay until he received a 10% ownership in the company. Cory was in charge of day-to-day operations and supervising 30 staff at the age of 28. He was also the one responsible for the bulk of the store's purchases. Regardless, he had zero ownership in the business. Even though the company was raking in $3 million annually, Cory didn't own a dime of it. He found that unsettling. Competitors' representatives had even approached him, allegedly offering him greater terms. It wasn't for show that he threatened to depart. A genuine sense of annoyance was the source. No matter how real or fictional, the family had never encountered anything like this before, and the cameras were rolling non-stop. However, emotions were already running hot behind the scenes. Things got even worse because of how popular the show was. It was acknowledged by former producers that some family disputes were deemed too heated to air. A $40,000 motorcycle was only one example of how Cory's reckless spending hurt the company. The pressure to succeed was relentless when you were a reality TV star and also ran a store. No days were off. Even going out to dinner became a difficulty because fans kept interrupting them. The distinctions between real life and performance started to blur. Cory's demands for ownership on screen weren't just a plotline, they were echoes of genuine discussions taking place in private. The emotional burden wasn't an illusion, it was the product of years of toil and the constant scrutiny of family life. At last, the family arrived at a turning point. Following lengthy discussions, Cory was granted a 5% partnership. It wasn't the full 10%, but it came with a sizable raise and the prospect of more down the road. Cory saw it as a victory. He went from being a mere employee to a genuine part owner. That 5% signified more than just a financial investment. It bestowed upon him the power to make major purchasing decisions without continual oversight, and his ownership was already worth a substantial amount, especially in light of the shop's increasing success. It also established him as the face of the business going forward. Instead of waiting to inherit the family legacy, Cory was constructing it one difficult talk at a time, and the show was documenting more than just entertainment. It was the handing of a torch. Cory's instincts, bravery and loyalty had transformed his role. Then a new type of wake-up call arrived. In 2010, Cory went to the doctor and saw a number that would alter the course of his life: 402 pounds. However, the number wasn't the only thing that rattled him. Is not a warning, but the start of a medical emergency. The doctor promptly prescribed diabetes preventative medication, and Cory knew his health wasn't simply in danger, it was on the brink of disaster. He realized this wasn't about looks, it was about survival. His body had begun to resist insulin, and the drug was a last-ditch attempt to prevent full-blown diabetes. Diabetes doesn't only make life difficult, it may impair eyesight, kidneys, harm the heart and reduce life expectancy by decades. Cory realized he couldn't continue hesitating any longer. Something had to shift, and it had to shift quickly. What transpired revealed his depth of desperation. Neither his insurance nor his bank account could afford the lap band surgery he required. Doing what most people would never dream of doing, maxing out 4 separate credit cards to cover the cost, was a no-brainer for Cory, who had no problem making a decision that could have a profound impact on his future. It was a life-or-death decision that demonstrated how seriously he considered the threat of dying, and he opted to incur debt instead. The surgery became a symbol of his determination not to let his weight to ruin all of his hard work. He was more concerned about living long enough to enjoy the future he was fighting for than about interest rates or diabetes. 6 weeks later, the results were more impressive than any press release. Cory shed 50 pounds in just over a month and a half. 8 lb week, which most doctors would consider dangerously rapid, was evidence that Cory had made the correct decision. His stomach could now only hold a few ounces of food at a time, which forced his body to burn off stored fat. He had dropped almost 150 pounds by the end of the first year, but it was those first 50 pounds that really set him on the path to success. They proved to him and everyone else watching that his risky decision to incur debt was paying off, and they gave him the drive and determination to keep going. On April 26, 2014, while riding his motorcycle to pick up some last-minute items for the party his family and friends were throwing at his house, Cory Harrison, whose 31st birthday was intended to be a celebration, had a near-death experience. At 40 miles per hour, his bike's bottom fender mount unexpectedly snapped. What had been an ordinary errand became an incredibly dangerous one as the motorbike began to spin out of control. In the split second that followed, Cory had two options. He could either slam into approaching traffic or a nearby wall, or he did the unthinkable. He sprang off the bike while it was in motion. The leap was swift, terrifying, and felt like his only choice. Falling to the concrete at that speed could have been fatal. He stayed on the bike until it broke, but luckily Cory was alive despite all the scrapes and bruises. Surprising everyone, he decided to go to the party anyway, despite the pain and the fact that he was definitely going to die. While in shock, he attempted to keep things normal by greeting visitors, smiling for photos, and otherwise acting as if nothing had occurred. No one at the party understood what had transpired. He didn't go to the hospital until he had fulfilled his duty as the birthday host. It was in the emergency room that the physicians found the complete extent of the damage. Before all of this, Cory had found love in high school. His hand was so badly fractured that it required surgery. To hold everything together, 8 screws and 2 metal plates were put. That hardware stayed there permanently. He first crossed paths with Charlene Steele as youths. The couple wed in 2009 and even worked together at the Gold and Silver pawn shop. Charlene was more than just a reality TV star's wife. She became an integral part of the shop's everyday life. Following their 2015 divorce, she continued working at the shop for a while before starting her own online accessory business. What was remarkable about the divorce was how quiet it was. There was no drama, no public battles, no blaming game, just stillness, and that silence made others assume even more. Plus, in 2016, Cory rekindled his love affair with Cory Harrison, better known as Kiki, an executive assistant at a casino in California. The two were married in San Diego on May 26, 2017, after a short but intense courtship. Cory was very public about his feelings for Kiki. He posted photos of the two of them with heartfelt remarks and shared many happy moments online. Unfortunately, their joy was short-lived. They filed for a divorce in August 2018, a mere 15 months after the wedding, while Kiki was pregnant. According to the court records, they had already resolved all issues related to child custody, child support, and paperwork prior to filing. In his respectful public statement, Cory stated that they loved each other, but their schedules made it impossible to work it out. Richard Benjamin Harrison was born to Cory and Kiki in October 2018. The name was chosen in honor of Cory's grandfather, the man fans knew as the old guy on Pawn Stars, who had died 4 months earlier. The timing of the birth was emotionally complicated. The divorce was finalized in September. Cory started the reunion rumors by posting a photo of a tattooed wrist with the name Harrison and a romantic remark. However, nothing was proven, and soon after that they stopped appearing on each other's social media. They were officially divorced, but they had just welcomed a baby together. Not much improved. In October 2020, Cory borrowed a 37-foot RV through RV Share from William Valifa. Originally, he was meant to return it after 3 days, but he ended up keeping it for 6. When it was ultimately returned, it was a complete wreck. The body was broken. The awning was beneath the polished exterior of a consummate professional. We find a fascinating study in contrasts. On stage, commanding attention with natural grace, yet in private moments, seeking solitude with an almost methodical determination. The duality of such public figures continues to intrigue observers. Demolished inside were empty bottles, sand, and broken eggs. The disarray suggested vandalism. Belafana put the damage estimate between $20,000 and $30,000. The cost of the bodywork was about $8,000 and that of the new awning another $7,000. Despite having a net worth of approximately $2.6 million, Cory allegedly refused to pay for the damage and instead canceled 10 bookings due to the RV's unusability, which had a devastating impact on his business, particularly during the pandemic. According to Cory's representative, the RV's pop-outs wouldn't retract, and the company had insurance, but it didn't address the issue of the internal damage, so Valifana was compelled to file a complaint with the North Las Vegas Police Department and attempt to collect on the insurance. Continued, further complicating an already chaotic scenario. Then came the DUI arrest. Cory was pulled over by Las Vegas police near the intersection of Main Street and Charleston Boulevard at approximately 2 o'clock in the morning on September 8, 2023. His white Ford F-250 had been wildly swerving in and out of the officer had to utilize a public address system to convince Cory to stop. He was returning from filming in Minnesota and was driving less than a mile to his apartment. Cory had his ID out and claimed that his vehicle was pulling to the right, which was causing him to swerve. Following a failed field sobriety test, Cory consented to a breath test. However, upon arrival at the Las Vegas City Prison, the equipment proved to be malfunctioning. The officer noted that Cory's eyes were red and watery, and he gave out a strong odor of alcohol. Cory expressed his frustration to reporters later on, stating that he had only had one drink during his flight, and none after landing, because the intoxilizer was not available. Instead, a blood sample was taken by the police, were never made public. He was arrested at 2:28 in the morning and released almost 8 hours later. He pledged to retain legal representation and contest the accusations. Richard Harrison, who fans knew better as the passed away, on June 25, 2018, at the age of 77. Up until his passing, the fact that he had been battling Parkinson's disease for years remained a mystery to most. The family kept his illness a secret, so viewers had no idea that this man had played a role in constructing the man who built the empire was quietly fading away. Fans felt it was sudden, but for his pawn shop and nearly 300 episodes of Pawn Stars, the timing couldn't have been worse. He retired in 2017 as the show was reaching new levels of success. Family, it had been a long quiet goodbye. On the same day, Rick Harrison paid tribute to his father, describing him as a hero, a friend, a father, and a teacher. An impressive 245,000 people shared his post. Many people saw the post, and they could sense the sorrow in Rick's words. In a separate post, Rick included a photo of his father from his youth. He expressed that the old man would be missed by fans all over the globe, not only his family. The Gold and Silver Pawn Shop also released a statement, stating, "Richard passed away, calmly with loved ones by their side, but nothing had adequately prepared them." With only 2 generations left to work side by side in the shop, a second wave of sadness washed over everyone. On January 19, in 2024, Rick's youngest son, Adam Harrison, was discovered dead in a guest home in Las Vegas. Adam was 39 years old and had been missing since January 17. Worried neighbors eventually convinced the landlord to check on the building, and they discovered Adam unconscious. Tragically, the police report verified what his loved ones had suspected, that he had been acting strangely in the days leading up to his death, isolating himself and exhibiting paranoid tendencies. Although Adam's passing was not unexpected by his loved ones, it did not ease their grief. The coroner's office officially announced the cause of death on February 29, 2024, with the drugs fentanyl, and about 107,000 Americans died from drug overdoses in 2021. Nearly 88% of opioid deaths used synthetic opioids like fentanyl. The death was considered unintentional. Methamphetamine poisoning is one of the deadliest combinations in the country today. Rick didn't hold back in his statement. He said the drug is 50 to 100 times stronger than morphine and that a small amount can shut down the body. When combined with methamphetamine, it becomes practically difficult to survive. Cory Harrison, Rick's other son, had his own troubles even before Adam's murder. The fentanyl epidemic is pouring across borders, and no one seems to be stopping it. Adam had become just another number in a rising catastrophe that keeps stealing lives every single day.
On August 17th, on a motorbike tour with Hot Bike magazine in 2014, Cory made an unscheduled stop at a bar in Jefferson City, Missouri. After 7 consecutive nights of partying, he continued to drink shot after shot that night. Eyewitnesses claimed he hadn't eaten all day. By the time he reached the second bar, he was already wobbling. The owner of the establishment recalled his entrance and assumed the worst. Things went horribly wrong at approximately 11:20 that night. Cory undid his pants and peed on a bar stool in full view of everyone. The whole incident was captured by the security cameras. The owner observed the entire incident and asked Cory how he would feel if someone walked into his pawn store and did the same thing. The staff hurried to intervene, and the subject even posed for shots with his pants down, giving a thumbs up as he did so. Get the mess cleaned up, but Cory didn't appear to care. When confronted, he hurled a bar stool at the owner, who then pushed him to the wall and had him kicked out. Pictures from that night went viral, and witnesses said that Cory had been drinking heavily throughout. His conduct was characterized as careless, rowdy, and unruly. According to one source, he was prepared to do anything that night. This incident seemed inevitable after a week of heavy drinking, starvation, and non-stop partying. What exacerbated the situation was Cory's attitude. There was no shame, no apology, just mayhem. Years later, fresh worries emerged. In 2024, during the 22nd season of Pawn Stars, fans began to notice something off about him, but he didn't seem embarrassed. Since Cory suffered a terrible motorbike accident in 2014, breaking his arm and injuring his back, fans started wondering if he had scoliosis because of his slouched posture, which gave the impression that he was in pain. His physical condition appeared to be catching up with him at the age of 41. Photos and appearances from that period showed him looking exhausted, but the family never publicly addressed the topic. It added yet a new dimension was added to an already tragic tale as Cory's involvement in the pawn shop evolved. Despite maintaining his position as co-owner, filming ceased. Following 16 seasons, Pawn Stars was placed on indefinite hiatus. The History Channel declined to renew the show contract. Rick had hinted at a potential remake, like Pawn Stars 2.0, but Cory made it plain that he would not be involved with it. He expressed his disinterest in continuing to play the part of a 23-year-old when he was actually 41 years old. His big move came just 3 months after production concluded in June 2024. He moved to Tulum, Mexico. When asked about it, he simply said he was done and wished everyone success. Now in Mexico, he's concentrating on a new venture. He's collaborating with investors to launch a business, Big Horse's Smoke and Joint, a barbecue joint. It's a radical departure from his television career. He began Pawn Stars at the tender age of 26. Now after 16 years on screen, he's doing something new. He departed from stardom, Las Vegas, along with the store that fashioned him,